Heh.
Yo, yo!
Yeah?
We're here with
Castlevania Order of Ecclesia, I think it's pronounced. So, this is a little odd, because I think this is the first DS game we've ever,
Oh, yeah.
LP'd.
We've never done a DS or 3DS game before.
So, if you notice the very, very tiny screen in the corner... Did I set it up right? Yeah. So, for the most part, this game takes entirely on the bottom screen, but also doesn't need a stylus.
And it has loud.
Yeah, so we're doing Order of Ecclesia. I really wanted to do another Castlevania, like Metroidvania game, but I wasn't sure which one I wanted to do. Because, honestly, even I can admit, they kind of blend into each other, especially like the Ego era. But I really wanted to do this one, not only because it's like the last classic real Castlevania ever made, but this game's really interesting. It has a lot of cool ideas. This game is flawed for sure, but it's a cool game with a cool concept.
Let me ask you this, because I've never seen DS emulate. I know people do it all the time, but DS emulation.
What? You mean a real console?
DS real console, right? I mean, to be fair, Nintendo, if you're listening, we both own this game. Both of us own this game personally. You know, so it's like, that's literally what emulation is for, is when you own the dang game.
The only time we will not be using Jod. I don't know why.
Dark has always been the thing we name our Castlevanias. Anyway,
yeah, I don't know why.
Let me ask you this. So, obviously, the bottom screen is the right one, top screen's the left, of course.
Yeah.
Right? How do they do touchscreen stuff on an emulator?
You just use the mouse. Like,
Okay.
you click with the mouse. It actually works pretty well. But especially if like I was doing like a more stylus-based game, I would have to sit behind the keyboard and like both use, because I like using controller. The keyboard's good for some genres, like FPS games. I always play with keyboard, but like games like this, give me a controller, bro. But yeah, you just kind of have to sit there and use the controller and the stylus at the same time, which actually isn't the worst.
I think it's pretty obvious that the two genres that you need mouse and keyboard for is FPS and real-time strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the two.
And also,
And I think I've personally played both of them, and I think you have as well, on here, on LPs.
strategy in general, RTS, even MOBAs, even though MOBAs are just dumbed down RTSs, FPSs for sure.
But imagine playing this game with mouse and keyboard. Like, I know it wasn't a PC game, but no thank you.
Alright, so we play as Shanoa. This is our friend Albus.
Is this the one where it's cut up into levels, or is that Portrait of Ruin?
They're both sort of cut up into levels, but Portrait of Ruin still takes place entirely in Dracula's castle. This one actually takes place in not entirely the castle. I would actually say that 50% of this game is outside the castle.
But Albus!
Yeah, so the beginning plot is about how, Albus is pretty mad that he's not the bearer, even though that, What's-His-Face promised him to do it. And, he seems unreasonably upset, like maybe he's jealous, or...
Now, I know...
inferiority complex, but who knows?
I know all the Castlevania games are technically in the same, you know, universe, Dracula, all that. Is this, like, kind of a separate story, or does it, like, directly go off other ones that you know of?
It definitely is, like, canon timeline, for sure, before they rebooted in Lord of Shadow. This one takes place in, like, just some random year. Like, the beginning of the series is basically Lament of Innocence, and then the end of the series is Dawn of Sorrow. Every other game kind of just takes place in the middle. And this one especially, I think, just takes place in... I would say probably after Simon Belmont, but...
Oh, we're looking it up.
Oh, yeah, that's...
For folks out there, I think the Castlevania Timeline is one of my favorite things in the world. That means nothing. Like, there's no reason for me to care so much about it, but I just love it. I think the thing I love about it so much is it takes place over, like, literally, like, 1,000 years.
I think it takes place over more than maybe more than 1,000 years. About 1,000 years.
All right, I'm gonna try to be nerdy on numbers. I think Lament of Innocence, which is the first one in the series, takes place in 1089, but we're about to find out.
How do you know that off the top of your head?
Ready?
I was gonna say it's probably the 11th century, but I wasn't.
1094. I need to find the timeline where it just shows it as, like... So, you said Lords of Shadow, like, literally...
Yeah, Lords of Shadow rebooted everything.
Dang.
And then I think that new Netflix show that sucks also rebooted it again. Konami really respects their properties.
It's pretty based.
Then again, no big company respects their properties ever. So Albus just
I'm trying to think of companies that do. Nintendo does for the most part. You know,
they're almost like
too much.
Yeah, it's like almost too much. Like Disney, I would have said that Disney respects their properties, but especially with all the live action like cash grabs, they definitely don't anymore. But Nintendo is like almost too heavily guarded. I would actually say that I don't think at all Disney does anymore. I mean, look at Star Wars. Yeah. Just like we have Star Wars, a million movies. They don't care about Star Wars. They milk Marvel for as much as they possibly can. Alright, so we're getting into the Glyph System, which is the main difference of this battle system in this game. It is very interesting. It is a little annoying, and it definitely takes some time to get used to. So this is really weird. This is the only game I'm seeing on this list. This is the official Castlevania wiki, which, I mean, whatever, right? It's like run by a bunch of nerds. This is the only game that doesn't have an official date. It's 1800 something. It says 18 question mark. It really seems like it's just... That's why I was like, it just takes place somewhere. But all other games have a specific, you know... Wait, I wasn't paying attention. What do you want me to do? Oh. So this is right before... The closest one to this would be, like, literally, like, potentially 50, 60 years later, you have Castlevania Bloodlines with John Morris Whip Guy and Eric Lacard Spear Guy. And the one before it would be Richter Belmont and Alucard in, like, the late 1700s. So, it's just so cool. I love the fact that, like, it just, like, continued for so long, you know? Yeah. I think the most interesting thing about the Castlevania Timeline, and I think this is probably more to do with, I don't know, it seems like it's almost intentional, but also they wanted to get around to it eventually. But the Belmont who permanently destroys Dracula, there's a very specific thing in the Castlevania universe where the Belmonts have to give up the vampire killer and give him to the Morris family for, I don't know, like several centuries. And they're not allowed to touch the vampire killer at all. And the Belmont who finally gets the vampire killer back is Julius Belmont, and he's the one who permanently kills Dracula. Well, permanently kills, even though Soma is the reincarnation of him. But they never made a game specifically for Julius. He shows up in Dawn of Sorrow and Aria Sorrow, but Soma, who's the reincarnation of Dracula, spoilers, is the protagonist in those games. So I always thought that was really interesting. Oh, so Dracula's completely destroyed before the final game in the series, which, when I looked up, it was like 2036 or something. Did you say, oh god, because it was like super slow down? It was like slowing down, yeah. I hope that's not a thing. Is this computer just not handling it? I don't know. If it's a problem, I'll take a break and just lower settings, I guess. Is this normally what it would be like? Do you normally run kind of slow like this? Yeah, the running is kind of slow. Okay. It's running fine now. Okay. Because I know some games... it really depends on, like, the run speed, you know? Yeah, so this game, like most of the Castlevania, starts pretty slow, and I would say that this game possibly has, like, the worst beginning of any of the Metroidvanias. The way that the Glyph System works is that you have two main attacks, which is mapped to X and Y, and then you have a, like, support skill on R, and as you unlock stuff, it gets really cool, but especially in the beginning, you just have these dinky rapiers, especially the first bosses are just kind of damage sponges. so I'm trying to get through the beginning part.
Can you do
fast.
that Symphony of the Night move where you just constantly backdash?
Kind of.
Okay, it's not nearly as fluid.
Yeah.
Well, you better start mashing that over and over again.
Yeah, the problem is, I'll show it. If you do it really, it's kind of fast.
Yeah. I like those. They're cool. Nice sandals. Nice 3 HP on those ghosts.
Yeah, they do have a lot of defense, so they only take me 1 minute. Yeah, so, this game, Spencer, you actually platinum Bloodstained, right?
Yeah, I did.
I was actually kind of taken aback at how much Bloodstained, like, I wouldn't say, like, copies from this game, but definitely lifts in design from this game. It is very similar in a lot of ways.
Well, even the music sounds very similar.
Yeah. All the Ecclesia
soundtracks
are very similar in a weird way. Alright, so we got our first support glyph. This one's pretty interesting. It's like a magnetic field, and you can fling yourself up and down.
I'm trying to think of what this reminds me of.
I want to say that Bloodstained had, like, something a little kind of similar to this.
It could be. I'm trying to think of a game where you literally would, like, pull yourself with the... Like, am I just thinking of Mario Galaxy? Like, it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that's it, but it seems like the closest thing. Well, I mean, already you have a move that is essentially... Well, it's a limited double jump. So if they want you to be able to reach stuff, you can easily reach it.
Yeah.
I was about to say, like, you already have a move that makes, like, you know, something like a double jump unnecessary, but then I'm like, no, wait, you have to have those little circular things there, so... I take it back before I even said it. Question of the part. 2 parts. 1. You gotta pick one, bruh. Original style Castlevania.
Ooh, that was lucky.
Or Metroidvania Castlevania. Trevor and I disagree. I like the original style. Trevor likes the Castle. And I don't dislike the Metroidvanias.
Yeah.
I've played them plenty. But if you were like, you had to get rid of one completely, I'd be like, all right, see ya, Metroidvanias.
If I had to choose one, I'd choose the Metroidvanias, but I definitely like both of them a lot. Castlevania in general is, like, possibly, like, my second favorite franchise other than Mega Man.
Second part of the question, lads, name your top 2 Castlevania games. And your most hated one, okay? I'll start. Number 1, always Castlevania 4. Really hard to beat it. The game is just really the best platforming you can get. And I'm actually going to go out on a limb. I know this game is not, in any ways, the best Castlevania game, but it's one of my favorites. And go with Circle of the Moon. I know that it's pretty limited, but it's also the game that I feel blends both genres best.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Because anything after Circle of the Moon, it tends to be, like, very, very, very Metroidvania, whereas Circle of the Moon has, like, the old school feel as well.
It's funny because Harmony of Dissonance, I think that's the second one in GBA, is actually probably more like a classic Castlevania than even Circle of the Moon. But Harmony of Dissonance also sucks. I mean, it's not, like, terrible. I mean, I'd rather play that game than a lot of other games, but...
And it
is very awkward.
I'm going to finish up really quick and go out on a limb for my least favorite. Now, I'm not counting the weird stuff like Judgment, Castlevania Judgment, and I'm not even going to mess around with Lords of Shadow because it's just a God of War game. I'm going to say Castlevania 3, the American version. It's too hard to be a good game. It's very frustrating for me because it has so many things in place to be amazing. It has... the graphics and the sound and everything are incredible.
I was about to say that Castlevania 3 might be the best looking and best sounding game on the NES, which is why it is so frustrating that it's just too hard.
It has... And you know what? There's 2 things about it. It also has branching paths, which is incredible for a game at that point.
Yeah, it has multiple characters.
Multiple characters, and they all have their different strengths and weaknesses. And you know the most frustrating thing is the Japanese one is like 1,000 times easier. You know, not even counting the fact that the Japanese one has better sound because they could use the Famicom disk system. That I'll forgive it. I mean, you know, we just had the cartridges. But, like, why make the Japanese one, like, playable and then make the NES one, like... I'm so mad at that game. I want to be able to just pick it up and play it and beat it. Now, I'm not saying that I want to be able to just go through and destroy it and never lose a life or whatever, but, like, the thought of beating Castlevania 3 is, like very just makes me mad, you know? Alright, Trev, go ahead with yours, then.
Wait, so we were ranking...
Top 2, and then most hated. You can just, you don't have to do best, you can say favorite.
Is
like,
it specifically classic? Or,
nope.
Okay. I still have to say my favorite is Symphony of the Night. The game is just, it is my type of game.
It is awesome.
Second favorite... It's actually kind of a hard one.
You ain't kidding about these bosses.
Yeah. Now, I will say that the bosses, except for this one, the first one's really easy and boring, but the bosses in this game are very good. They're probably the best thing about this game. And, like, even something like Symphony of the Night is, like, one of my favorite games, but even I can admit that,
wait.
if you know what you're doing...
This guy, he said your name is Albus. She was just talking to him, like...
Yeah, so during the ritual where Shinoa was absorbing the Dominus glyphs, Albus interfered at the last second, and it made Shinoa lose all her memories and I think all of her emotions too.
Okay.
And she had to start over from her glyph training from square one. So at this point, like, Shinoa doesn't even know who Albus is, other than some annoying guy.
That makes sense. Anyway, so Symphony of the Night, your favorite one.
Second favorite... I'd probably say Castlevania 4.
You know, it's crazy that Castlevania 4 is an early, like a first-year SNES game.
Yeah. I wanted to say Rondo of Blood, but if I would have to pick up one Classicvania and play it, I'd be picking 4 any day.
If I was a little bit older, because I was, what, 3 when that game came out. If I was like 10 or 13 or whatever when that game came out, it would blow your mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, oh, let me get the Super Nintendo. And then freaking Castlevania 4.
I mean, I still think
oh
Castlevania 4 is a amazing looking game and like was really basically a tech demo in terms of showing off the Mode 7.
Yeah, I mean, they had so many parts where they're just like, here's Mode 7, honey. It's crazy. Okay, and your least favorite. And try to stay away from the low-hanging fruit if possible. And then you folks out in YouTube land, I want to hear your answers as well. Alex Swingle, want to hear your answers.
You have saved me.
I'm gonna have to say... I'm gonna say Lords of Shadow 2 is my least favorite. It is a terrible game. It caused the death of the series. It's everything I hate about modern gaming. It had really poor, like, stealth sections, and it felt really weird and bad. I just hate it. I hate the Lord of Shadow universe. I don't like the first game at all either. It's just everything that I hate about Konami into one package.
I had no idea that Lords of Shadow, like, rebooted the franchise. I had no idea. Even when I was looking at the timeline, they're like, here's the Lords of Shadow's alternate timeline. I'm like, what?
I'm not going to say this with a fact because people will probably just get mad at me. Well, I don't know who would get mad at me. But I think Lords of Shadow was Kojima's idea, or at least like he had like some sort of maybe producer role, or just sort of like this offhand idea.
Kojima is a visionary, but that does not mean that every one of his ideas is always good. I mean, Death Stranding is not good. We're gonna say that every month until everyone in the world realizes it. But yeah.
And it's unfortunate because Death Stranding is like, there's so many stagnating series. Like anything that EA or Activision or Ubisoft puts
right,
out,
it's nice to see a new IP.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm so tired of these franchises. I'm so tired of these monetization, just publisher corporate greed fests. But like, Death Stranding is a cool idea, but that's all.
I mean, even something like series I love, like Resident Evil, or like Zelda. Like, it's nice to see this stuff lasting for a long time. But it's really fresh to see good new IPs. You know, It just is. Like Ghost of Tsushima, I just started playing that, and it's like it's nice that there is a literal, pretty good, pretty decent new IP out there. Like, it's refreshing. Rather than just friggin' Resident Evil 55 or whatever. Yeah, I played a couple hours of Lords of Shadow 1 and I was like, ah yes, it is one of those classic This Is God of War. Back at the time where I think we talked last week about how Resident Evil 4 is like potentially the most important game of the last 15 years, but God of War had a lot of games that just straight up copied it. They're like, you know, square and triangle attacks, and you can combo with them, and it's like, oh god.
Even at the end, God of War was running out of steam. Like Ascension, like who cares about God of War Ascension? Not even whoever made it cares about God of War.
I want to play it at some point just to see, because I think I heard it like has like time travel stuff. Like that's your ability is like you can like almost like the Prince of Persia Sands of Time. But I'm not, obviously, if I really, really cared, I would have played it already, you know?
It's just weird because I think timeline-wise it takes place, like, the first of the entire series, but, like, Chain or whatever...
Interesting, because Chains of Olympus is all about that. That was the whole point, was it was a prequel.
And it's, like, another prequel.
This is how Kratos had even a worse life, you know what I mean? Yeah, so... What was the original point? But yeah, it's nice to see these new IPs. Oh, yeah.
The point is, remember when Kojima was good?
Lords...
So just real quick, one of the main problems with this game is that if you look at the map, you notice this layout, it's a horizontal line. A lot of these non-Castlevania areas are pretty lame. Some of them are better than others, but even the better ones are like pretty short and pretty lame. So it's a cool idea, but it feels like they just ran out of time in there. There's like, whatever, just straight line.
Lords of Shadow, I remember playing it a couple hours and I was like, this is just God of War. Isn't it that you're playing as Dracula, or someone that becomes Dracula?
Yeah, in the end of Lords of Shadow, you eventually become Dracula.
Okay, and then...
Of course, the actual ending of Lords of Shadow 1 is paid DLC, so that's cool.
Oh, God. Also, this looks... amazing for the DS.
I forgot to mention it, but this game looks incredible. I always really like pixel art. Obviously, in the background they have some sort of like 3D model, but since it's so like stylized, it actually still looks pretty good.
Yeah, this looks great.
Dawn of Sorrow, the first DS one, also had a lot of 3D backgrounds, but it felt like they were like, hey, we have the DS and it can do 3D objects, let's just do every background.
Do you eventually get the ability to swim? Because it looks like you can go down.
Yes.
Okay. That's one of the things I like about...
They actually give you the ability to swim and double jump pretty early.
The Metroidvanias, when you see something that it's pretty clear that you could, like, do, and it's, like, nice to know, like, oh, this is coming up.
So, we're trying to save everyone in the village. It's actually very similar to Bloodstained in that way. But to get the best ending to this game, you have to save all... I think there's like 13 villagers, somewhere around there.
And Brave Fencer Musashi.
Yeah.
So Lords of Shadow 2, isn't it like there's like two... It's like... How do I explain this? The gameplay is based into like two separate like stories or something? I remember hearing something about how it's like really split up in some way.
I actually never finished Lords of Shadow 2 because it made me so angry and it was so unfun.
Is it a God of War style game?
It is sort of, but the premise of the game is that the first one is obviously very much a God of War clone. It has the same God of War combat, it has the same God of War platforming. So it's just a
straight clone.
It is an okay game. But Lords of Shadow 2 has like these stealth sections with like insta-death, because it takes place like several centuries after.
Do you still play as the Dracula?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he's like weakened, because I guess he doesn't eat humans, and it's been several centuries, so he's like really crippled and weak. Yeah, that sounds...
I gotta admit, as a story person, I like the idea of that. Like, maybe this version of Dracula, like... I don't know, maybe he's not an altogether bad quote-unquote guy, you know?
I mean,
like,
he's pretty much... It's been a while since I played Lords of Shadow, but from what I remember is that he's pretty much tricked into it.
Okay.
You meet 2 other vampire girls that are very much like the Bram Stoker, like the movie. They look like that.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, that sounds cool to me story-wise. I like that idea. But if the gameplay and everything doesn't work, then, I mean, it is what it is. How do you get past this nincompoop?
There's some... Buddy. The problem is that this guy has a really, really weird moveset. Since I'm behind him, you might start doing it. Yeah, he has this, like, goes backwards, and he's definitely more annoying going backwards than that. Oops. This is going to take a lot.
Do you have any heals?
I might have, like, a potion. I really don't want to use it, though. I did just save.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so, I don't know. I don't think it's any one of those games I would ever play, but I'd be interested in reading about the story, at the very least, of Lords of Shadows 2. I mean, especially considering it quite literally is the last Castlevania game ever, so... I think. I forget if the 3DS one or Lords of Shadow 2 was the last one. I want to say Lords of Shadow 2.
Now, unfortunately, they did make some, like, shovelware phone game. So
that doesn't count.
It's like technically...
Nope, doesn't count. Anything, like, it's like, if you're like, anything that came on the phone doesn't count. Like, if I'm like, oh, I'm a big FF7 fan, and you're like, oh yeah, did you play Before Crisis? The phone-only game from, like, brick Nokia phones from the mid-2000s? Hey, like, no, I did not. Doesn't count. So yeah, they can deal with it.
I'm dealing
Wait, what was that meme? You have phones, don't you? You all have phones, don't you? It was like Blizzard.
Yeah, Blizzard Activision. The most out-of-touch company in the world.
Oh, God. And it's funny because I mean, clearly they still make money hand over fist, and people, like, love their stuff.
And it's like, it's true that they probably make a lot of more money from, like, Overwatch and phone games than they do World of Warcraft now. But you're announcing it and acting like that at BlizzCon. The convention that avid fans go to. Just pretend not to be a soulless corporation for 1 second.
Like, I guess you could, like, announce it, like... What are those, by the way? Oh, is that save?
No, they're like, work points.
Okay. You could announce it as the very first thing, and then just be like, okay, you know, just, like, kind of like... Alright, I know you didn't want to hear that, but we have to announce it. Now, next up is this cool thing, you know what I mean?
Honestly, if I was the organizer...
You probably wouldn't announce it there, I know.
I would announce it on, like, YouTube.
Yeah, like a YouTube or, like, a Direct. I don't know if other companies do Directs. I guess nowadays
I would do it, like, 1 day after BlizzCon ends.
Yeah. You have phones, don't you? Oh, God. You know, that's something... Ooh, that looks really good.
It looks pretty cool. So if you get spot by the spotlights, yeah, that head is way over leveled than what I am right now.
That's one thing I missed from this year, is no absolute cringe E3. And I gotta be honest, I don't think E3 has a future. Like anywhere near what we know it now.
I also think that one of, like, the heads of E3 got in trouble.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
No, wait, I might be thinking of Evo. That's definitely Evo's head got in, like, a lot of trouble.
Like, I guess it doesn't even really matter what it is. Yeah, I'm gonna miss that mid-2000s for that, where, you know, Sony literally pooping their pants on stage with giant enemy crabs and $5.99 USD and Ridge Racer and all that. I mean, it's so good. And then the late mid-2000s where you have, like, what's that guy, that comedian that is, like, the least funny guy in the world? Jamie
Oliver?
No.
I think I know who you're talking about, but...
Like, he's so unfunny that, like... I mean, I like Adam Sandler movies, and he's, like, that unfunny that I wouldn't even... Like that. Anyway, like, being literally drunk on stage and being like, so tell me, Tony Hawk, about Tony Hawk Ride. And it's like, oh, this dude's the funniest. Jamie Kennedy. Jamie Kennedy. I'm gonna miss it. And now, like, all you have is Nintendo Directs where they're like...
there hasn't been any Nintendo Directs in forever.
Well, I mean,
Nintendo hasn't released a game in like 8 months.
Eventually you'll have
Animal
one.
Crossing.
I mean, that's all they need to do anymore. It doesn't even matter.
Dude, like, Nintendo fans are going absolutely insane because, like, in the past 8 months, they've done, like, 2 or 3 mini Directs, but they're, like, exclusively, like, third-party stuff. And they're just like, we don't care. No one buys Nintendo consoles for third-party stuff.
Someone was asking about, they heard that the next Zelda game's coming out in early 2021, and I was like,
yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so.
You can't believe everything they read online, but I've been hearing some horror stories about how Nintendo is so old-fashioned that work-for-home orders is, like, decimating them.